Okay, how bad was I feel like
You were cutting out a lot.
oh
If you want me to
fuck
be
me. It's
blunt.
always these episodes. It's always
Decent, yeah, it was a decent chunk of cutting. Like you could mostly kind of tell what you were saying. Like it wasn't super bad. There were points where it was kind of bad, but like you could pretty much tell.
Yeah, there were points where I was like, damn, I will never know how that sentence ended.
I'm pretty sure what's gonna because
You're
the
still
good
you're
thing.
still chopping up a little bit too, by the way.
What the fuck? Okay. Let me jump to
Sorry,
mobile.
brother.
Oh my god.
Yo, I'm telling you, bro, it's the IDF, it's Israel. They know.
I still want that gas, yes. And you had better deliver.
This is Greenhouse Gaslighting, a free and independent podcast discussing society and culture with a left-wing, down-to-earth perspective. If you've ever wanted a deep dive on the issues, but felt like the bar for entry was too high, then you're in the right place. I swear to God, you know what? Because when we were trying to do the one about the campus encampments, that's when like we had the most like audio cuts on.
True.
Yours came through crystal clear, and honestly, like your input was what mattered the most for that episode. So I'm like, okay, I can't justify not releasing this. But every time we're trying to talk about some real shit, and I'm not saying that like we don't talk about real shit on other episodes. This is when like I get all the technical errors happening. So thank
Mm,
you both of you for your patience.
no worries.
Um, so welcome back to the greenhouse, dear listeners. And happy Juneteenth. Um, we've got a guest on today. So joining me and John today is Jaslyn in LA at this time. And we wanted to have a bit of an extended discussion on events in LA as of late, as it pertains to increased opposition to ICE's presence. So, Jaslyn, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. LA is really crazy right now, so I feel like now's a good time to talk about it for sure.
So, I mean, as of late, if you under a rock, I'm sorry that you're finding out now, but you know, this interview is taking place amid the exacerbation of conflict in law enforcement in Los Angeles. And to put a fine point on it, the Trump administration seems to really be making a play to worsen it as best as it can. Um, I was gonna probably touch on this a bit later in the discussion, but it almost feels to me like a bit of a round two mentality is happening with Trump and the right, especially with how they feel aggrieved by some of the uprisings and protests during the first Trump term, during the George Floyd and Black Lives Matter protests. Am I wrong to read it that way, or what's the vibe you guys have been getting?
Um, no, it's definitely like it definitely feels like I don't want to say like a civil war, but it's starting to feel like that in a sense. At least like as close of a civil war as you can get in the modern age right now, in America. Because it really is like it's not just like right-wing conservatives. There's like a whole different subcategory now when it comes to people that support Trump. And you know, here in LA, where it's a very, very, very leftist city, or at least liberal city, and you see people like fighting ICE, fighting the National Guard, fighting the cops, the cops fighting back, and like all of this stuff, and it's just like it's definitely I don't know how to word it, but it's really bad. It's really bad to say the least.
That's fair.
Um,
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. That's fair though. Like I wanted to talk a little bit more about like you mentioned LA being super liberal, fighting off ICE. I wanted to talk more about that, kind of like the conditions that led to the protests before we kind of jump straight into the protest, right? So like no, ICE has been active here in Michigan as well, because we're a border state. They've been using really dumb logic. A kid was a DPS student was kind of like snatched up by ICE not too long ago.
Yeah.
What are some big things, or have there been big things in LA that's been going on between like local law enforcement, ICE? Like obviously, like something's going on there, right?
I want to
Yeah,
interrupt real
I
quick
mean,
too.
sorry.
I'm so sorry. No, no, no. It's like earlier this year that Michigan authorities were letting the feds in, and we've talked about this on earlier episodes. It that it was going to exacerbate things for the rest of the country. But that like the so-called liberal cities, so like Los Angeles and NYC were the big targets. This border region excuse for a minute, but it's exploded across the country. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. You cut out a bit there, but I got the gist of what you're saying. But yeah, no, it's bad, and they're going to like all of these like major places, like because Michigan, even though it is a border state, but it also has like I think the largest population of like Arab Americans as well.
Yep.
So they're, and I have a lot of, like Mexican friends as well in Michigan. And, I have one close friend who has a family member that is undocumented, and it's like a really scary time, So like I know that like even though I'm kind of like in this world of like the physicality of fighting ICE, like the real life, like, toe to toe with like ICE and the National Guard and all of that, I do have like ties back home where it's scary. Like I know that it's scary everywhere in America right now, for a lot of people. And yeah, it's just like it's a lot, But John, can you repeat the first question that you had for?
Yeah, no, I was just asking kind of like the big thing was like what events have been going on with ICE? What do you like? Obviously, they've
Mhm.
been doing the crackdown. Has there been anything like a super big case or anything that's been going on that kind of led to? Because I know that there were protests. There was the No Kings protest, and then there was
Yeah,
protests before then as well,
yeah.
which were just like generic. I believe just anti-ICE protests. I could be wrong about that, but I believe that's what they were. We've had some over here. But a lot of ours were kind of rallying behind a kid named Michael. I'm blanking on his
Mhm.
last name, but he was like snatched up on a field trip. He was
Whoa.
as a DPS kid, a Detroit Public
Mhm.
School student. So I was wondering kind of what led to the conditions of this protest, like where there was ICE, snatching people off farms or snatching people from the city, like what was going on in LA?
Yeah, they were coming to places, taking people, and I know like the one that like really instigated the protest was I think they were downtown or somewhere in
In the fashion district, yep.
yeah, they were somewhere downtown, yeah, in the fashion district, I think it was. And um people like they were coming for, I don't remember if it was a particular person or just several people, like all of the details of that, but I know for a fact that like people the I believe it was the workers there or the people out on the outside, I can't remember, but they locked ICE inside, and then that's what started like the protest because yeah, like you can't come to like a city like LA that is literally like, I don't want to say majority immigrants, but immigration is like very, very large here, especially, with like Hispanic countries. So having that happen, people immediately reacted, like immigrants are what make the city in regards to like everywhere you go. I mean, there's Filipino town, there's Little Tokyo, there's Koreatown, there's Hispanic families literally in every single neighborhood, like things like that. There's a whole street like for like Ethiopian culture and Ethiopian food, things like that, So everyone like immediately reacted. They locked ICE inside, and then that's when like the cops came and like everything just blew up, and then there were more protests after that. So.
And
That's
if I
awesome.
recall too, they were specifically targeting, I forget, like an SEIU member, an organizer, for trying to push back against. Again, I don't think, especially for people who feel like this isn't personally affecting them, realize the size and scale of just how this is happening to, if not your family, it's happening to your fellow students, it's happening to your neighbors. They're losing family members. Again, I know like the detention facility in El Salvador has been pretty high profile, but I don't think people are really understanding the impact of, because there's a lot of talk about authoritarianism in other countries, for example, right? I don't think Americans have fully internalized people are getting on dubious circumstances, whether or not they broke the law, under explicit, xenophobic and racist incentives for policy.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. I remember watching a video earlier today, and it was like, someone describing America the way our news outlets would describe like Iran or something. And
Right.
it was straight up dystopian. It was like, oh yeah, and this current regime has been open firing against protesters and any forms of dissident. I'm like, that's literally happening. No, you're entirely right. That's true. That's America. Um,
Yeah.
speaking more of the protests, though, Jaslyn, I guess the next question is, so we talked about kind of like the conditions, kind of like what kind of happened, the tensions that was there. I guess the question now is, what have you been seeing as of late? How did you get involved with the protests and everything?
Um, I I love a protest personally. I anytime there's a protest with something that I'm like extremely passionate about, I will probably more than likely be there. You know, that's how it was in 2020 for me as well.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it was just, when we were at the No Kings, because we went to a protest before that, um, maybe like a week before or a couple weeks before. And that was really bad. You know, they were just shooting at people for no reason with like rubber bullets and stuff like that. But the No Kings one was especially just like insane because, we got there, the first one that we went to a couple weeks ago, we didn't even really mean to be like in the center of the protest, but we were driving down like through downtown and I was bringing my friend back um from something that we were doing, and we saw like overhead, like on the bridges and stuff, like while we were driving on the freeway, like all of these people with signs and stuff, and I was like, man, like it feels wrong to just like, because I told him earlier, I was like, I want to be at the protest, but we had this thing planned, so we went to do the thing, and then when we were driving and I was dropping him off, I was like, it feels wrong to like drive through this and like not stop and support, so we got off the freeway and we were just looking for parking, and then when we were looking for parking, we turned on a street that just happened to be in the center of the protest. For some reason, they didn't block it off. So my car, as I was driving past, like we drove right through the standoff between, the people and the police. And as I drove by, like they just immediately started shooting at my car with rubber bullets. And so that's
Fine.
when I was like, okay, well, exactly. So then we got out, and that's when like we went to like the people and we were like, asking them stuff. My friend was like recording. He has like a bunch of footage from that first protest. And yeah, like they were just like shooting
Oh,
at the people.
so this wasn't the No Kings protest. This was the
This
ICE
was the
protest.
first one a couple weeks ago. This
Oh,
was
okay, okay.
yeah, this was the first one. And I mean the No Kings one was also basically the ICE one as well, like it was like a mix of like both of those things. Like everyone was there for both of those reasons.
Right.
But yeah, the first one, like, I just drove by and they immediately started shooting at my car. And I did see like protesters, like, in a sense, like fight back, quote unquote, by like throwing like empty water bottles and stuff at them. But then like they would just shoot more. Like they were just like trigger hungry, trigger happy, trigger.
Yeah,
Is that the
happy.
term? trigger happy. But yeah, it was really, really insane. And then, then there were like these like firecrackers, and it was just like so scary. And the reason we ended up leaving that protest when we did, sorry, did you hear that beeping noise?
It's all good. It's all good.
Okay.
We let people's
but-
whole dogs barking in the show. It's fine.
okay, cool. That might happen soon. But Yeah, like we left when we were leaving the protest, because I was like, my dog was in the car because we didn't plan to be in the center of the protest. We were just gonna like stop, show support or whatever, and like see what was going on, and then like leave because I had my dog in the car. But then they shot at my car and like all of that stuff, so we had to get out. And when we got out, we were just there for like so much longer than I wanted to be. So we finally left because I was like, I need to get my dog out of here. You know, like he's freaking out in the car and everything. And as soon as we got into the car, there was a protester that came up and she was like, hey, like this guy just got shot in the head with a rubber bullet. We have to rush him to the hospital. Can you take his bike to his house? And so we
Holy
took this
shit.
guy's bike. Yeah. And it was like covered in blood and everything. And we put this guy's bike in my car. We drove it to his house, you know, and I was just like, I can't believe like they're like aiming at people's heads, you know? Like it's just like insane, especially because like at the No Kings protest, my friend, he got shot with a rubber bullet like near the end. And it was when we were literally like no one was throwing anything at them, no one was doing anything. They tried to shoot this one guy that was near us and they missed. And then he was like kind of like instigating a little bit and he was like, yeah, that's right, you missed, you fucking missed, blah blah blah. And that's when they started shooting like at the whole area, even though we were running away because we saw them lift their guns. So we just all started running and they just started shooting with our backs turned and everything. And they got my friend like at the very top of his shoulder, and I was like, dude, I feel like they were aiming like at your head, you know what I mean? So it was yeah, like it was a really violent time. We got tear gassed for no reason as well earlier on in the protest. That was really awful. And all of us were just like standing there, and then the National Guard just started like tear gassing the whole area. And then when everyone was like kind of trying to like leave or like peacefully protest or continue the peaceful protest, they started trapping people. They let out an alert that was like, there's a 8 p.m. curfew in downtown Los Angeles, but they sent it at like 7:15. So everyone was still obviously already there. And so they just started trapping people in order to get them to leave. But when they were trapping us, they were also shooting at us, you know? So it was just, it was really scary and it didn't make like any sense. So
You think they kind of like use the curfew as a way to kind of like
Entrap
like
people.
yeah, kind of is
yeah,
that
yeah, basically. Because I was like, how are they going to send out an 8 p.m. curfew when there's like hundreds or thousands of people here and it's like almost 7:30, you know what I mean? So it was just, yeah, it was ridiculous.
And I know this was amid a lot of chaos. This was the National Guard.
Yeah, well, the National Guard and the Marines were there. The Marines were there
Okay.
and they were like lined up with like guns and stuff, but it was the National Guard that came through on like their trucks and tanks or whatever, and they like started tear gassing, and it was just like really insane because everyone was like everyone was literally chanting peaceful protest, and like they just started shooting, and it was just like it was
Which is what
just
gets dismissed in some of the reaction. I'm sorry to jump in, but it's like a lot of people comfortable, like suburbanites who have never been to a city, have been talking about this like it's been a riot, but the kind of peaceful nature of this demonstration has been lost on that because they've bought into that narrative. And also, like, I don't think people are really internalizing, or they're trying to deny, has kind of been instructed to escalate and worsen the situation and make things more desperate, to, if not do more desperate things to justify an arrest, create the conditions to like dragnet people in a way, right? And to that end too, you know, the same people will say, well, it was only rubber bullets. I don't think people realize like just because it's not lethal doesn't mean it doesn't hurt and have like arm damage that it does. And this was again in 2020, people were talking about this too, where it's like rubber bullets can still some of these like tear gas and some of these chemical irritants have long-term effects. They're not harmless. They do cause harm.
yeah, I feel like it's so crazy. Like as Jasmine, what you just said about the like walking the bike back, he got shot in the head with a rubber bullet and the bike ended up covered in blood is crazy. Like
yeah.
the idea that like less than lethal means safe, I feel like is
Yeah.
like that's such a big problem because then you see headlines where it's like, oh no, the National Guard were just using less than lethal rounds, so it's okay. But like it's not. Like people are getting maimed.
No, yeah, and honestly, like my friend picked up a couple of the rubber bullets. They're ginormous and they're hard. And yeah, it's like I asked my friend, I was like, did it feel like getting shot with like a BB gun? And he was like, yeah, if the BB gun was like 100 times the size and and was like 10 times more pain, then yeah, I felt just like that. And I was like, yeah, for sure. Like it's like they were shooting people and like this guy got shot like in the dick, we saw another guy got
No way.
shot. Yeah, like people were getting like really hurt out there, so yeah, like it was just it's not quote unquote lethal, but it can be, and like you said, it can have like long-term effects and everything. So yeah, it's ridiculous. I remember seeing people in 2020, they got shot with rubber, like one guy got shot like in the eye or something. Um, and that became like a whole thing, and like he like couldn't see out of that eye anymore, like things like that, So yeah.
That's crazy. Kind of like stepping back, right? Now that we've gotten to the nitty gritty of it. Um, I guess my question for you, Jocelyn, because I know you're definitely more online than I am. How does social media play a role in this? Like, what have you been seeing online in terms of like the things you've actually experienced versus like what's been going on online? Have you seen like weird people kind of like supporting what's going on in terms of like Trump and the National Guard? Have you been seeing people more pro I guess pro anti ice is how I'd say it. But like what have you been seeing online versus what you've actually experienced?
1 second, sorry. I would say what I've been seeing online, it really depends, because if you go on like Instagram, I would say the majority of people that I've seen are pro anti-ice, But then you go on Twitter, which is owned by Elon Musk, and there's been a huge shift in Twitter where like you go on to something political that's trending and you'll like really only see right-wingers tweets about it, or like people who are Trump supporters. So it's really only when you're on your own feed and things like that where you can like see the majority of people, like what people outside of that sphere are saying. There are obviously a lot of people that are very much so like anti-immigration basically, and they're like, well, if they were just here illegally and blah 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 blah. And
Mhm.
it's just like it's a ridiculous like conversation to try to have with someone who doesn't want to be open-minded, um but I would say the majority of people that I've seen online have been like a lot of my friends here, and again, it's a very like blue city, but a lot of my friends here, every single one of them, I think, for the most part, have been at least one of the protests. There on No King's Day, there was protests on like, and probably every major part of LA, all like literally all over the city. Downtown was just the worst one because of the National Guard and stuff, and because it was at City Hall and all of that. But I would say the majority of people that I follow or that I see online, and I know that it's like you kind of curate your own feed, so it's a little biased for sure, but I would say the majority of people are like fuck ICE, So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I just I wanted to ask because like there's like for the No Kings protest, there were definitely some here, and I've seen people like online, mostly on like I would Google it and find a random Reddit thread or something, right?
I think
And
there's been
Reddit's like the
yeah,
worst part of the internet.
Reddit is so bad, man. I don't understand. Like I'm
but
so
if you
glad I
want to study
stopped using that.
normies, if you need to study normies, like sick people like me will stay on sometimes.
I am so glad I got off that because like the first thing I see in like r/Detroit was like a No Kings flyer, and half the post is people like, oh well, yeah, why would you join socialists or try to fight
Yeah,
ICE
yeah,
to
yeah.
get these illegals out of here? I'm like, what are you doing, man? What are we talking about?
Actually, though, like that is the type of discourse I've been seeing. Because, like, generally, like if you keep to like left-wing friendly circles or like you curate your social media feed better, then yeah, you will just see people support it or who condemn the violence that the authorities have escalated to. are, reaffirming the humanity of people being oppressed. But I see a lot of like anti-solidaristic language,
Mm.
like the type you were talking about, right? So, and it's on multiple axes because with No Kings in particular, it is a bit more ideologically confused. It is mostly liberal oriented. I wouldn't say that the average liberal has a coherent ideology 100% of the time in America, right? Are like conflating communism with fascism. A lot of them are kind of like making a without, defining what they mean by that. My real gripe actually is that they don't really have clear, which is fine. I think he's as bad aesthetically as he is politically, but when you what you want out of it, and maybe this is a problem with this current opposition to Trump versus past opposition. The coherent ask was for impeachment. Now I don't know what the coherent ask is for. So on that thread of anti-solidarity, there is this like increased resurgence of the electoral. Vote for Kamala, we don't want to talk to you. There's even like, anti-solidaristic stuff along ideology. Would you let leftists in? And then I even see it across some racial lines or even class lines, right? Where it's I've like FD Signifier was talking about this, and I think he was making the guest he had on was making people wouldn't have shown up anyways, but he was talking, in the context of the Black community of like, oh, why should type of discourse. I've also
Mhm.
seen it from like, as a South Asian, I've seen some equal ends to model minorities, and we should like buy into the Trump camp and whatnot. Right. So there is a lot of disingenuous anti-solidaristic language I'm seeing out there in the discourse. I also wonder too that like the support for law enforcement activity is out of this agitation by the right of like, whether it's like they call it tough on crime approach, whether it's like a real resentment of status quo, whether it's a round two mentality because they kind of did get down in 2020 with those protests. But I'd say the calls for of violence are coming from the political right, and their style of discourse is enabling it, but it's certainly them like defending and justifying it, which isn't good either.
Oh, 100%. It's so funny when no, I don't want to say the Minnesota shootings are funny because like they're not. That's super super bad. But the reaction is always goofy, right? Like
Oh yeah.
everyone trying to figure out like where ideologically did this guy stand. And it's like he had a list of people who he wanted to kill. Ilhan Omar was on that list, and everyone's like, "Oh, he's an extreme left wing." I'm like, "What do you? What do you mean?" And then I think there was like there were like some flyers or something, some No Kings flyers or something that he
Like
had.
false flag style
And
stuff. That made me paranoid.
yeah, and it's like it clearly like it comes out. Oh, big surprise! This guy's a big Trumper. Like I know for the No Kings protest here in Detroit, we had a protest and a march, and we didn't have too much in terms of counter protesters, but there was this one group of people. I don't want to say I don't know their exact name. I think they're like a biker gang around here, and they were like being agitators and being kind of ridiculous. And the police definitely stepped in to kind of like break out, not really break up like a huge fight. Like it wasn't gonna like be anything crazy, but it was like your basic agitation. Jasmine, have you seen stuff like that in LA? Like, are there? I'm sure you have, right? Like, or like where there's like counter protesters. Because I know, especially we bring up 2020 a lot. And I know that during the course of like protesting in 2020, there was always this. I don't want to say this paranoia, but in a word, paranoia of like cops joining the protests and actually being the ones agitating, and there was a lot of discourse around that. I'm wondering if is the same. Could we say the same thing happening here, or or is it just cops straight up in uniforms, just like escalating the protests?
It's definitely more of the latter, I think, because again, like I'm in a way really lucky to be in a place that is so liberal at the very least, if not leftist in some areas, and because there's a difference, right? But like,
Yeah.
I would say that it's mostly just cops straight up. It's really just like law enforcement versus the people of LA. You know what I mean? Like it really is. That's honestly been the primary thing. Like again, everyone was peacefully protesting, like literally just like marching up and down or just like sitting and standing outside of city hall with like their signs and like their chants and everything, and then the cops would just come in and just start doing shit, you know. I even saw a video.
They burned Waymo cars. They burned Waymo cars.
Not the Waymos.
Yeah.
Come on, man. What are we gonna do without the Waymo
Which
cars?
They
is-
burned an Adidas store.
Yeah, it's listen. I'm not gonna sit here and be like a conspiracy theorist or anything, but it's really hard to believe that like the people that were actually there for like the actual reasons to be there were the ones doing that, you know what I mean? Because again, like everyone was very, especially at the No Kings one, like there wasn't a single fire or anything like that. It was just, you know, police and National Guard and Marines just like instigating shit, you know? So yeah, I would say in a way that I'm lucky that we don't have to fight the police and like Trump supporters at the same time, like in person at these protests, but it's still a lot, you know, when you have like all of these militarized groups coming together, banding together just to like hurt people that aren't doing anything, you know? So.
And it's especially weird too because, John, you tell me if this has been your read of the No Kings protests. More confused, incoherent, maybe more white too, if we're getting there. But like, doesn't offend the status quo, the less likely it is that you're going to get the cops called on them. Obviously, some juries may vary, but like in this particular case, because the ask was much clearer, and again, I've seen a lot of stupid. You're impeding law enforcement. That's okay. Like there's these ideas that like legality.
Yeah, I mean,
Even
no,
this
you're
whole
entirely.
thing, this
Yeah.
thing,
Sorry, go ahead.
right? Where it's like, oh, I was just saying, like, when people quibble about looting or when people talk about, the violence or whatever, right? I don't take the bait because they want to catch you on every single count that they deem offensive. But it's that old JFK about like, if you make peaceful revolution impossible, you are only creating the conditions for violence. King of the Libs said that, by the way, right? So. Yeah.
I mean, no, I think you're
I,
entirely right. Like, I went to the No Kings here, and someone mentioned that No Kings had a ton of sponsors, and one of those sponsors was Walmart. I don't know if that's true or not, but like, even if it's
Aris is
not,
involved, I think. I don't know what the
yeah,
full extent is, though.
like even if it's not, it's like okay, you know what I mean? Like this, like the No Kings. While I do have sympathy for like what they want, like it's an anti-Trump protest, right? And I'm not gonna pretend that like I'm not happy about that, right? Because I don't like Trump. Does it go as far as challenging the status quo in the way that I would prefer? No, absolutely not, right? Personally, but even still, like I personally view the No Kings protest as good, as necessary. Even if the politics are a bit messy, even if they are a little bit incoherent, even if they are like super liberal as opposed to leftist. I don't know. Like when it comes to that kind of stuff, like the left is I don't know, man. Like we need protests. We need agitation in the first place, and I feel like No Kings is a good way to do it. But at the same time, it does feel like how do I put this? It feels like Disney trying to make a political movie. You know what I mean? Like it
That's
feels like
actually okay, because I was talking to Sky about this too, because I had been feeling for a minute too. I've been trying to figure out some stuff in my personal life, right? About like, you know, I haven't made it out to some of the No Kings protests, even on top of not being radical stuff lately, right? And I was feeling bad about that. And Sky's kind of read of it is like No Kings is a way for certain people to be a sense of like they got to show up, show their quirky sign, and feel like they did some, but that's
Oh
only
my
scratching
God.
the surface.
Like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not a sign hater. I love those. Some of the signs were so good. Okay, I get that it's really like I know they were all white people. Okay, I know they were all white people. They had no
Sometimes they
drip.
be going off. So
They had no drip. They were a little corny, but their signs were pretty fucking good. I'm not gonna lie. Okay.
Some of them really did make me feel though. I'm like, are you here for like social media purposes or are you here for a protest? You know?
Ooh, that's a good point too.
like the types that are always like, if Kamala was president, we'd be at brunch. Those are always just
Oh,
Yeah.
uh, uh,
Yeah.
Kamala, Miss, we're gonna have the biggest and best military ever.
I mean, more than
Right.
that too is like it's just revealing your privilege.
And honestly, I don't know. I feel like they were there were a lot of I didn't see too many quirky signs, at least where I was in the protest, because it was like it did span like quite a few blocks, but at least like at least where I didn't see too many quirky signs, and honestly, some of the ones I did see that weren't even really that bad or anything were the ones that weren't even from like being held by like white people, you know, they were being held by like Mexican Americans and like Latino Americans and things like that. So I didn't have too much of an experience of that, but I did see a lot of it online and I was like, oh my God, like it's cringy, you know what I mean? Actually I saw a couple get freaking engaged in front of like in front of the protests. It was like
That is
Oh, that's
unbelievable.
not the time. Oh my god.
it was really really tone deaf. I was like,
Peak
wow,
20
like it was literally like right in between the standoff between like the cops and the people. And I don't know what city it was, but it was just like this white couple in between them and like the guy proposed and I was like, wow. Like wow, you know what I mean? Like
Bro, that is
it's,
like
so
I've
like
heard
how
about
do you
shoot
how
your
do you
shot,
even
but this is ridiculous.
like how do you even like what is the wedding gonna be like? Like is the wedding gonna be like the everyone it's like Black Panther themed, you know? You know what I mean? Like how do you think their wedding's gonna look? It's gonna have like the Pan African colors everywhere, two white couple or the white couple, right? Like crazy.
I wish that's what
yeah,
they're doing. I hope there's wicker furniture at that one.
honestly, I feel like they should just keep people of color out of it this time, you know, whenever they get married.
Oh my god. Oh my
Crazy.
god.
Yeah.
Um so something that because I think we hit up a lot of these questions in the outline already. This is one I was thinking about at first and I've changed my mind as I've answered this question. Are there any parallels between today and the 1992 riots, or is this a false comparison?
Um I saw that question in the outline and I did not want to be the one to ask it, I'm not gonna lie. So when it comes to obviously also I've never been to LA before. This is stuff that I've read. I want to throw that disclaimer out there. I don't want to
Just-
pretend like I'm an expert, but like when it comes to like the riots in the 90s with like Rodney King, it's like so many people died, right? Like I feel like
Mhm.
when it comes to LA in the 90s, like those had a I don't actually know the number off the top of my head. I'm gonna probably look that up in a second. But like I know that like a bajillion people died. Um
I think like the context is definitely different, but I think like
I feel like
the
no, I think it's the
way
opposite. I think the context is
it's the
similar, but the result, right? I think the actual result. I think the context is super similar, right? It's still racial. It's still definitely based in class, definitely steeped in like racial tensions, right? It's just that like
codes,
I
but
think it was just the LAPD going crazy, you know?
Right, right. It's almost like the violence exploded, let it explode was maybe switched up in that situation, but it's like it's hard.
Also, I did just
Yeah,
Google it. It was just 63 people that died, but that's still a lot of people. Like 63 is a lot.
but you see how the narrative, you see how the narrative of
I heard 53,
violence.
but sorry, go on.
You're all good. You're all good. Right, because like the narrative of riots as like this inherently shameful or violent thing, right? These aren't like difficult events to pass through, but they happen due to like decades of unanswered problems and violence, and then they explode in these public incidents. And I feel like with something as high profile, the 92 riots, and then just like with particularly our own history of racism in like the context of Los Angeles, from what little I know, and I've also never been. I've somehow the furthest is Seattle, and I didn't go south after that for whatever reason.
Yo, same, literally the
How
same.
did we do this? How did we do
Yeah.
this? But like you know, in some ways, like we kind of don't understand that California can sometimes be the Wild West still to this day. And in this way, right, like politics of racial resentment have still existed, still parsed through, and type of violence, right, is replaying itself. So I feel like the discourse and the camps of discourse are occurring along the same lines as they did in 92, probably the same way they did in the 60s, you know, with things like the Detroit riots. I'm hearing a lot of the same discourse. And I think, again, it's just like the right can conveniently use civil and riots as a justification for their own desire to have the monopoly over violence. And again, like you can answer with like that very moralistic two wrongs don't make a right, but it doesn't address the fundamental play that cause these events to happen. And I don't think they have an interest in making things better. If the goal is to prevent riots, they would have done something about it, unfortunately.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
100%.
yeah.
You know,
Sorry, go on, John.
yeah, no, I was gonna say, you know, MLK, right? The riots of the voices of the unheard. If you want to stop it's like, you know, it's the same shit repeating, right? It's the same social contract being burned, right? Like if you don't, you know, we'll support your goofy ass institutions. You know, we'll be civilized, but like you need to make sure that you're not doing fuck shit. Essentially, you can't just snatch people, black bag people off the street, and then toss them in an El Salvador prison. You can't, you know, go into LA, a city that is just not run by immigrants, but like it's supported. Like immigrants built it. There's so many different groups of people, like Jasmine, you were just saying, right? I feel like
Yeah.
if they really wanted the violence to stop, they would just do better, you know? I feel like that's kind
It's
of the riot.
also very weird Americanism, right? Where it's like we can demand that certain ethnic groups and nationalities be compelled to immigrate, take the jobs that citizens don't want, but we can also hate them and want them kicked out. And it's something that like you're seeing in like agriculture. It's like you deport migrant labor, what happens? And then they're like hemming and hawing about that. You see it in every aspect of how things are going with this administration, of wanting to have their cake and eating it. And instead of them dealing with the consequences karmically or politically, it's all of us dealing with it.
Yeah, no, straight up.
Yeah.
So I guess with that, we can probably move into the next part of the discussion, right? So we can picture context. Let's see, we talked about this versus no kings. We've talked about the discourse. I guess I try to see history as like a bit of a linear process to some extent, right? It's teleological. There's a point A to a point B to a point C. So when you think about like, westward expansion, imperialism, taking California as part of like Mexico's territories, internal imperialism within the United States, is it fair to see everything we're seeing out of LA today as part of this historical process, or is this an aberration in some sense?
All right, first off, that
I think
was so many big words.
Sorry,
Yeah,
sorry,
it was.
sorry, sorry, sorry.
Um, but I think it's fair, like everyone when I was at the protests, everyone there, we were all kind of well aware, like we're living the history right now. Like we're in that part of the history book that will be released in like 2060 or something, you know what I mean?
Mm.
Um, it's I definitely think so, especially because, I don't know if it's gonna I feel like it might just get worse in a way, depending on where our country heads, because so much is distracting people from certain things, like right now it's like, yes, there's like this ICE and immigration thing going on, but then it's like, okay, we also might be in war with Iran, and then people are still focused, and as they should be, on the, Israel and Palestine conflict, and it's like there's so much to focus on that I feel like no matter like what happens, it'll distract from something else. And so I think at at some point people are just gonna get fed up, you know what I mean? Because even though it was like a No Kings protest and people were, you know, protesting against Trump and against ICE and all of those things, I think at some point more people will start to band together in a sense and realize like this is fascism. This is the administration that was quote unquote voted in and everything like that. Like, this is the consequence of that, And I think more people will start protesting a lot of different things. Like, even several months ago or last year, I can't remember exactly when, but I think like or maybe it was the end of 2023. I don't remember, but even then, like there were huge like pro-Palestine protests going on in LA as well, So I think having the National Guard and the cops and the Marines come in and like try to quote unquote calm down these riots that aren't actually riots, I think that's sort of like a sign of where the administration is heading, because if all of these militarized groups are going to come in for a peaceful protest against ICE, like what happens when they start protesting the war? What happens when they start protesting these other things that come up? So I think it's a good and beautiful thing that people are standing their ground, and still protesting regardless, but it's one of those things where like I think this is just like the beginning of more things like that starting to come out. So I think it is fair to say that this is like a very historical time happening right now, for sure.
It's
I
good
highly agree. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just fully
No,
agree.
no.
Like, there's that saying that like what is the saying? It's like you can have like all of three. Like we're living in a time where it's like it's so many decades packed into like a handful of weeks, right? I forgot the full saying, but I'm sure.
Oh, it's from
Uh,
Lenin. There are weeks where or sorry, there are years where nothing happened. Sorry, there are decades where nothing, and then there are weeks where decades happen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think we're in the weeks where decades are happening. I think you're
We're in the
entirely right. We're it's too much, man. Like it, it's insane. I think that going back to the larger picture of the Monroe Doctrine, and what you said about imperialism, I think that I feel like one of the bigger things that kind of caused these protests, right, is ICE, right? ICE collectively is the bad guy here. And I do kind of view very I don't want to say various populations of immigrants, but like I do view like certain like specific overexploited immigrants as like an internal colony, right? Like we figured out how to do imperialism on ourselves, I guess. The state is doing that on us, right? Where like even when you have those, I think there were Venezuelans who were all deported to the El Salvadorian like concentration camp. Like even then, like Trump bragged about how like he got paid money. Like there's like money being exchanged for filling up this prison. And then the
Yeah.
people in the prison are going to be doing late, like that's a concentration camp, you know, like for literally like the immigrants here, the overexploited here, the black people, you know, we already have that whole issue with over policing in our neighborhoods leading to you know, prisons being filled with people that look like us, even though we make up such a small part of the population. And then what do we do in prisons? We do labor. Like it really is just imperialism but inside, which is funny because that's just another way of saying capitalism. But I don't wanna digress and use too many big words. But like yeah, I do view this as like this is just another you know, it's just like another cool neat way to do imperialism. And when people kind of rise up against it, it's like why, like because if you think about it, it's like why are we defending ICE so hard, you know, like why are we making up crime statistics, why are we pretending that every immigrant is
For
like
ICE
super
right now.
violent and yeah, like why, like the reason why we're doing that is because somewhere along the line there's some annoying rich asshole making money off of whether it be filling, you know, getting paid to fill a prison, whether it be, you know, it's like something. At the end of the day, like it's all for the profit motive. Like racism is always like the tool that's used to divide, but it's used so that, you know, people can, you know, exploit and reap in as much wealth as they can. So yeah, I agree 100% with what Jasmine is saying. And I'm tired of living in a history book. I would love to. Can we jump to like a period where nothing happens? I would love that. That'd be awesome.
So I mean, when it comes to digressions and big words, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry, gang.
No, it was a good question.
um, there too, right? Where it's like something should be said about how, especially post 2016, seems to be like the defining issue of the day, and how Democrats fumbled the ball on addressing that. We can talk about how specifically in the ways you've described, right? Weaponized particularly white fears about economic precarity, misled people into his regime where basically they're stripping states for copper wire, right? Like there's no other words for what's going on. It's like it is with fascist aesthetics, and it's the weirdest thing we've ever seen. But like you were saying, right? Um, the proper formula for this should be to build solidarity. Sparks of it in very positive ways, which we should see as a silver lining. And also, we can't. There's always going to be a cohort that's like, can we stop talking about Palestine? You know, really, go jump off a cliff if that's you.
Honestly,
It's like we can't downplay that all these issues are connected, and we should be all right. And what we say on greenhouse gaslighting all the time, right, is like these things aren't disconnected; they're not disparate,
nothing's happening in a
and
vacuum.
nothing is happening in a vacuum, right? And when we talk about how this connects to Israel, I mean, we should probably look explicitly at how like law enforcement in California, specifically in this case, right, takes training from Israeli officials.
That is true. Yeah.
And then if you take a look at the Israeli approach to governance and law enforcement, they are inherently viewing every interaction as one with a hostile entity. And if you look at how LA's policing, but policing across America, and how American policing is defined by this idea that you are policing an area you're occupying and that every interaction is going to be hostile. And it's about continuing to exacerbate and worsen the relationships. And it's, again, whether abolishing the police, whether you're pro police reform, whatever your flavor is on the matter, right? That there's no progressive progress on any of this. There's no forward progress on any of this without that elephant in the room, that American police see themselves as an occupying force in
Yeah.
wherever. And that is something that in our nation's partnership with Israel, right? Going to have to address that this partnership has cut us the second way. You know, we're not just sending them material aid. We're also adopting these approaches to how we deal with our domestic populations. The price for that.
I'm not gonna lie, you broke up a little bit towards the all throughout there.
Oh no, where'd I start cutting out?
You know,
Um,
it was throughout.
Wow, fuck
But
me, I'm being suppressed.
yeah, the government's tapping you, buddy. Like I said, GG's.
GG
All
for
I'm
real.
okay. If I can re-sum up what I like, you know, you have to look at the relationship between law enforcement in America and how they've taken training from
From the
Israeli law
IDF.
enforcement and from the IDF, right? And they view law enforcement as the activity of an occupying force.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
it's worth. You go ahead.
yeah, no, I completely agree. I like policing in America has always been fucking atrocious, right? It started off as slave catching, and they do 100% get their notes from the other genocidal lunatics, the IDF, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like it's cooked either way. Like I feel like there's so many different like angles to look at it if you want to view it through the lens of filling in prisons to, again, like I was saying earlier, filling in prisons to generate a profit because you're using slave
Right.
labor. It's like they're still slave catching, instead of boats to African nations, it's squad cars to black neighborhoods. It's the exact same thing. And then now with ICE going on, it's like it's also the exact same thing. But it's interesting because the IDF is specifically, quote unquote, is doing what it's doing to ensure the, existence of Israel from foreign threats. And it's like, you cannot have a police force that's supposed to be civil servants learning how to police from a genociding force that views, like you said, that views every single interaction as like one that has like a malicious combatant. It's just not. That's how you end up with shooting protesters in the head with quote unquote
Yeah.
less than lethal rounds. That's exactly how you get here.
Well, that's how America has started to oppress those who want to change the fundamental aspects of this country. It just grew its military, that's why so much money goes to like LAPD and NYPD especially is a huge, terrible one. But like that's how like the government and like America like has been able to, I guess, avoid civil unrest outside of like what they would just call like temporary riots because, just like the LA riots in 92 and things like that, like all it takes is the police to come in with like all their big bad guns, and like killing people and shooting people and hurting people and tear gassing people and all of that to sort of like shove down what the protest is actually about.
Yeah. That's true. You're so right. Like the second the military comes in, it's like it's no longer a peaceful protest. It's an angry, crazy riot that's been conducted by thugs who are burning LA down, who are burning Detroit down. And it's like you start to actually like read on some of the protesting that's happening in LA, and it's like most of it has like, or at least the curfew that I understand has been in a very small section in downtown LA. And it's like the city is fine. Like no, like you go on Fox News and they make it look like the city's gonna like someone dropped a nuke in LA. But then that rhetoric then just fuels more right wing hallucinations, right wing paranoia, which enables the president to go send even more troops, send even more Marines, just for the crime of like speaking out against them. It's crazy.
Which is
Yeah, no, it's
insane. Oh,
definitely.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's definitely like it's all, you know, like a planned thing, right? Like make the media like only get certain parts to make it look like, you know, the people of LA are rioting and looting and whatever, when it really is like a peaceful protest. The police come in, they start shooting people with rubber bullets, you know. I mean, there was even a video that's of like the parts that are kind of hidden where like the police are on their horses or whatever, and they were like getting the horse to like stomp on this guy that was like helpless on the ground, you know what I mean?
Holy
Like,
shit.
God.
yeah, and it's that's what they're there for though. Like they're just doing their jobs, you know, in a sense, because this is exactly what the American like government wants. They want to fund the police. They want to get people in order, and in the sense of like whatever the government believes is order, you know, like they don't want. That's why, you know, you look at like the DNC, you know, like they're not going to do shit. They don't care enough to actually change what is happening in America, you know what I mean? Because in order to change the fundamentals of all of this, like you have to knock it all down, you know what I mean? And so because America has built this extremely, you know, militarized police force in like every major city, and every city really, and that get away with so much, you know what I mean? They get away with so much. It's all planned to be that way, so that, you know, if there is ever some sort of uprising where they want to revolutionize or like change the fundamentals of what's going on, or they, you know, whatever the case is, like they can't, because we have the better technology, we have the better guns, we have the better blah 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 blah, and we have like all of this police force coming in and like tearing it all down before it can even really start, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. Adi, you might actually know this specific court case that I'm referencing, but I actually don't remember where it is. But like there has been several where judges have just openly ruled that like it's not the police's job to protect citizens or civilians at all. Like there's been cases where like a cop could have jumped in a violent situation and helped someone and he didn't. That the person who was injured sued the cops and the judge was like, "No, it's not really his job to actually protect you." And it's like,
Yeah, what's your concept of qualified immunity?
yeah,
And it's basically that, yeah, as a police officer, you have culpability even when something is absolutely your fault, and then even if you sue a certain wrongful conduct, qualified immunity can still be invoked. That there was any, you know, wrongdoing, and then like you said too, there's just additional court actions to continue that in other ways, whether it's like they have no obligation to actually help anybody. There's always this, you know, wrongful use of force, and I don't know how the current court is going to continue to rule in those matters, right? But
like yeah, but like
you're
speaking
definitely right
more on
there.
what yeah, speaking more on what Jasmine was saying, it's like if it's not the cops' job to protect us, it's like why are they here? Like they're here to beat the shit out of protesters. Like they're literally here to stop people from speaking out against the status quo. They are allowed to be violent. We are not. So they will use their state sanctioned violence to protect the status quo. And when people want to move that in a better direction, they shit on them, you know?
And one thing that you're saying there too, because, you know, the state or the police having a monopoly on violence, I think there's a second aspect there too, is like in having that very hard and sometimes win at controlling the morality of using it because they use it, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like even the times that me and a couple other people had to call LAPD, like there were even a couple of times when like, and it really depends on the officer to be honest, but there were a couple of times where they were like, yeah, like I wish we could do more, but like California law and blah 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 blah. And like you start to realize and I don't, and it's probably the same in every other larger city in America, but like the police are really useless in the sense of like you said, like they're not here to protect us. If anything, like they only come after the fact, you know,
They
and then
come
have
to
to like
protect
determine
property. That's really what it is.
they, yeah. And you know, there was a situation like where me and a couple roommates had this one roommate that was like extremely dangerous and scary to be around. And we had to call LAPD on her like multiple times in the span of like 2 months. And they're like, yeah, well, there's nothing we could do if she doesn't come out of her room. And there's nothing we could do if, there isn't like blood or like an actual physical thing happening. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where it's like the police come after the fact. They're never like there to actually protect anyone from anything. They just come after the fact to clean up whatever mess they need to if they determine it as a situation that needs to be cleaned up by them. You know what I mean?
Which is probably the thing about, and this is something I talked about in the most recent episode. I know you guys had a discussion, but it just feels increasingly as of late to have to be the property owning. The DNC is way more concerned with like NIMBY and YIMBY style politics than they are economic justice. And then if you look at Trump, going over Newsom's head, not that I particularly, right? To send in the National Guard and Marines. It is this clear invocation of how dare you put property at risk. Who gets to have property and the systems of who's priced out of having a future. This system, right? The people were making this very cogent point in 2020. Now that like the police are only here to protect the property of certain people. They're not to actually create order or create conditions for delivering justice in our country. Is a gross misstep that is baked into it all. I hope I didn't cut out too much there.
You did, and that's okay, because I think we got the gist.
Okay.
Were you about to say something, John?
I just looked up the American police, their murder clearance rate. And it's like, so I think I'm trying to make sure I want to make sure I know what the clearance rate for murders are, what that means. I'm pretty sure it's like from arrest to conviction. It's like 52%. Like they don't even, which is like, I was just Googling because I'm like, because I'm sorry, my brain was still stuck on the it's not a police's job to serve you. Like it's I just cannot express how goofy that is. Like your job supposedly is to protect civilians, to stop murders, to stop doing the bad things. But if someone murders another person and gets arrested, there is a coin flip on whether or not the police will actually do their job and send them to jail.
I mean, take
Which
that even further, right? Violence is even more like fraught. You know how many rape kits just go untested in police departments across?
It's like what, like it's so crazy because if the police just like pretended to do their jobs, like if they just like faked it, like people would respect them so much more. Like you don't. It's just so crazy to me.
And especially when like police whine about like their poor public reception, ways to fix their reputation. If we are going to like be stuck with a crime and there's people to go after that like can justify that. But it's not about taking any steps to proactively deliver. It's about upholding the system at play.
Yeah.
And in creating that culture war about law enforcement, Trump's going to continue to exploit it. And as long as people continue to be suckers for it, it's going to continue to play out on these lines.
That's your good old Western liberal democracy for you. Either you end up with a socialist revolution or you end up with a fascist genocide, and there's no in between.
Yep.
So I know we've really covered like the breadth of this topic a little bit. I got maybe just two final questions close out on, and if there's anything else we want to talk about, we can jump into that. What are liberals missing about the current situation? And I know we've talked about that at length. Actually, no, I really think we've answered these two because we've already talked about liberals are missing, and we've also talked the discourse centered around the justification of violence or peaceful methods of protest.
True, true. I would say that if I wanted to add anything else to the what are liberals missing, um, I would say that like liberalism is a big part of the problem, right? Like fascism. It's funny because like I feel like when you ask a liberal, like, hey, where's all this fascism coming from? You know, they look around and they'll say really goofy things. You know, they'll be like, oh, it's authoritarianism only, or it's just human nature. But like no, it's because capitalism creates a breeding ground. It's like like fascism is a sickness. Capitalism and the liberal democracy is like the moist, dry, warm place where that bacteria gets to grow. It's like fascists don't need revolutions to get in power because they use liberal institutions in order to erode the institutions that are supposed to protect us, and they can then do fascism, right? Like I feel like that's because even at the No Kings protest, I tabled with DSA, and the whole point was mostly like a recruitment thing. We were trying to find as many mad liberals as we can and get them into reading groups and kind of radicalize them. Um, but like even then, I found people who were like just full on like Obama gear, kitted out, Kamala Harris gear, fully kitted out, and like they would look at a sign that says that like capitalism is the problem, and they would like scoff or laugh or whatever. It's like it is the problem. I feel like a lot of liberals just cannot fully comprehend that. Even the good ones, quote unquote, even the progressive.
I feel like some liberals really do resent that they can't be considered the real left, so they have to like be extra divas about it, like the way you're saying.
I mean, that might be it. Honestly, that's definitely a piece of it. Like, I do feel like, especially because so much of liberalism hangs on like this super thinly veiled moral arguments, and then you just scoot a little bit over to the left, and then you look at them and you go, "I actually have the more moral argument," and then they just lose their minds. You know, that's been my
And
experience, anyways.
to that end as well too, right? It's not just that capitalism creates these conditions. Capitalism is also in a very weird state, right? It's not just a warm, damp place. It's a hermetically sealed greenhouse, right? And media has gotten more sophisticated and people take on these absolutely false narratives about their own reality. You could almost say they're being gaslit in said
In the
greenhouse.
greenhouse. Wow, that's
Who knows?
good
Who
plug there.
knows? Who knows?
Good plug there. That was fire. I'm not gonna lie.
You guys are so funny.
You cut out there. What you say?
Did I actually? Did I cut out? Am I cutting
Not
out?
Cut out
really.
for what
Not
you say?
really.
What you say?
Not really.
I didn't hear it. Were you like y'all stupid? Is that
Oh.
what she was?
Oh, I said you guys are so funny.
Okay.
But yeah, that's my final thoughts on what liberals are missing.
Is that-
Any,
I was
any
gonna
other
say,
thou-
is this my cue to talk? Or...
Oh, I was just gonna be like no, like we've really like kind
I
of
think we've
exhausted our outline.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Any other thoughts? Before we start closing out.
I think. I mean, this is the way that it's always been, always been in a way, but I think that. I mean, and it's already been happening since Trump got elected the first time, honestly. But I think more right wingers will be headed towards fascism and just full on fascist. I think there are moderate people that will probably end up going towards the left, and I think a lot of liberals will just end up like fully leftist by the end of whatever the rest of this decade has to offer us, unfortunately. I mean, this is the first 5 months of this dude's fucking presidency, and we're already about to enter a war. There are like ICEs everywhere, and people are getting like detained and deported, and like all of this stuff is already happening. And we have like 3 more years of this guy, you know? So
Holy
I
fu- I
think,
did not realize it has only been 5 months. I
It's
need
only
a
been
fucking drink, dude.
And to tie that off too, right? Is like again, this is one of like the hottest summers on record. Wildfires in the country, economic downturns at like an all-time high. Nobody's got a fucking job. Like, I know I was making a joke about this, but it's like trying to apply for a job while ICE is out and like everything's going to shit is crazy. But
Unbelievable.
no, I literally just started moving, and like I had to find an apartment, and I was like, I really feel so weird that I'm out here about to spend like $1,500 on an apartment and like looking for an apartment and doing all these things while there are actual like protests happening and like all of this shit is happening around me. You know what I mean?
mean,
life
you gotta live
happens
life.
during societal, when
Exactly,
society's going
exactly.
crazy, your life still goes on, and like I think that's the part of life that feels like a history book, where it's like you have to figure out your day to day. These big events are happening. At the same time, though, like I don't know, I like, and maybe it's because I have a poor estimation of myself. I just feel so like silly or like just preoccupied with the wrong things, where it's like,
Yeah.
damn, rent is due, and like there's bigger, the fish to fry at the same time. And maybe that is the problem with everything is unstable, but somehow rent being due is the inevitability. Drives you insane. I don't know.
Yeah, and to top it off, like there are people out there, and I was like this for 6 months, and I know it was hard for a second for you too, John, but there are people out there who are like desperately looking for jobs. You know what
That's
I mean?
me right now.
And
That's
it's
me
like,
right now.
yeah, and like going through something like that while all of this civil unrest is happening, it's like it's literally just a big like what the fuck, you know? But that's America.
I was just
I
about to
feel like
say,
that's
yep,
always
God
been
bless
like that.
America. Yep.
Yeah.
The little joke I wanted to make was like, I'm really am a typical man, unemployed but somehow busy on a podcast. Anyways. Well, Jaslyn, thank you very much for coming on to the program and for sharing your experiences with everything that's going
Sure.
on. Please stay safe. In LA, continue to do the same. Be safe as well. Middle finger up. Fuck the 2x6. That's all I can say.
Fuck 12.
Fuck 12 for life.
All right. This has been another episode of Green. Actually, other plugs.
I don't have any plugs, but I will say, if you're listening to this and you haven't joined a leftist organization, you should probably do that, because that's I want to say a tried and true way of fighting fascism, even if it gets goofy. And I understand that leftists are annoying, but like, do it anyways.
My only plug is if you're listening to this and you're like, how can I help without, having to go to like a dangerous protest, or how can I help even though I don't live in a big city? I would say, honestly, go on GoFundMe.com and just look up immigration or look up ICE and donate to whoever you can.
True.
There's a lot of families on there that are looking for a lot of help right now. And that's one of the best and more interpersonal ways that you can help. That's my plug.
Definitely, you know what? If you're not in a position to do something, but you got someone's books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And to the listeners, thanks again for tuning in. This has been another episode of Greenhouse Gaslighting. All our links on the internet are in the description below to our link tree. And as always, take care, stay safe. Bye bye.